All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. This is Mary. This is the second TLA Talks interview, and I am here with the amazing artist. He's been inspiring me for like a year and a half, 2 years now. William Copeland. Just to give a little bit of an introduction about TLA, it is a brand new discipline. It's an intersection of community action and academic discipline, and it's centered around using language, be it spoken, sung, or written, around the art of causing an influence or a change in the world. That could be personal, could be political, could be communal, planetary, people take it in so many directions. We have activists, musicians, writers, academics, community leaders, spiritual leaders. I'm hoping at some point scientists I can even include in the talks. And nobody to me, like one of the very few people that have embodied that to me the most in recent years has been William Copeland. He hails from, am I doing good? William does definitely deserve the kind of the lauding. He's just an amazing lyricist. Also a very multifaceted activist. I'm seeing his work from being a youth director at the East Michigan Environmental Action Council to raising funds and going to Brazil for I think it was a Palestinian rights conference, forgot the specific name of it, but just being involved in so many different facets of Detroit and of connecting Detroit to the larger world and back. Including the concept of the Black metropolis that we've been discussing for a good while now. So just a lot of very interconnected decolonization efforts that kind of stem from, that don't, deny or forget his roots, but at the same time take that and extend it to the rest of the world and interact it with the rest of the world. I'm just very grateful to be here and to speak with you today. So I'm going to start with the first question. It's kind of the first question I always like to start with, which is, how would you like to introduce yourself? Let's reverse the narrative of what do you do? What do you do for a living? And kind of do it as, how would you like to present yourself to viewers, listeners today?
Thank you so much. I'm honored to have this session, this conversation, to be a part of this blog with Transformative Language. I would say first off, we'll see. Overall, I'm a cultural organizer from Detroit, Michigan. Overall, I'm a MC and a poet. Occasionally, I write essays. I think that the creative impetus, the creative force is a very strong driver in me. As you mentioned, I'm an organizer in the city of Detroit, work as the youth director with the East Michigan Environmental Action Council. Very exciting, very fulfilling, supporting and working with teens and young adults in Detroit. Also identify as a worker in the 2,600 plus year project of culture and healing of African people. Starting to learn more, develop more in this identity also. So I'm really just everywhere looking at my people, looking at my community coming out of Detroit, but really developing that long viewpoint.
Yeah. I want to start though with kind of starting with the roots, starting with Detroit, not just as an artistic sort of ecology for what you do and for the different collectives you're a part of, but I kind of want to start a little bit as an educational piece for myself and for our audience about Detroit itself, especially in like the histories that are being written today about Detroit and who's writing them. And I remember we had a couple conversations about that because it related to my home city of Cairo, and what kind of narratives are mass media writing about Cairo versus what kind of narratives are people writing about them. I guess just if you don't mind, I'll let you introduce like what kind of narratives you think are being written about Detroit today by mainstream media, and at the same time, what kind of narratives are you rewriting, reclaiming, and rewriting yourself, and also as a community member, as part of a community, what narratives are being rewritten from the citizens of Detroit in response to mass media declarations and finalizations of the fate of the city?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. That's a beautiful question, which we could really go extensive in our answers towards a lot of us in Detroit come out of various migrations that brought us to Detroit. My family comes out of great migrations, came from Mississippi and Georgia, brought us north to Detroit from the 40s to the 70s. In that time period, the African population, the black population was growing and growing. But for much of that time period, the power structure was still a white power structure. 1967, Detroit saw a civil uprising, which many Detroiters call a rebellion. And this gets to that first media piece. Many in the media called it a riot. Many of those who call it a rebellion talk about how this white power structure was full of police brutality, was full of limited opportunity, was full of housing shortages. And so the destruction that took place in 1967 during some very hot summers of 67 and 68 all across the country was not an act of random rioting, but was a rebellion against the structure of the time. The powers that be took this lesson, and Detroit became labeled as ungovernable. Meaning that it was the time for a white politician, the time for a white politic or power structure was running up, and that the black population, the African population, would not cooperate with such a power structure. So the first black mayor, Mayor Coleman Young, who was the longest running mayor in Detroit history, came in. And again, this also goes to media manipulation, because many times the mainstream media places Mayor Coleman Young, this first black mayor, as some sort of racial extremist, when the more I look into Coleman Young, he actually was very much all about what he called 50-50, meaning he did not want to take the various departments into Detroit to become all black institutions. He was going to go from 0 or about 0. He wanted to get it up to 50. But because of the media, I'll say hyperbole or exaggeration, they painted that as racial extremism. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
They painted that as this black extremism, as though Coleman Young was this racial extremist, when he really was trying to go towards something which was much more black and white people working together. So after Coleman Young, you have Mayor Dennis Archer, you have Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, you have Ken Cockrell for a brief time, Mayor Bing. You have these various administrations of black mayors. The narrative of Detroit grew as the power structure became more and more black. There became more and more funds, more and more corporations, more and more capital withdrawing from the city. Taxes, the tax base kept decreasing over time, which came to have a steamrolling effect. And so part of this narrative became Detroit is this unsafe city. Detroit is this place of lack. Detroit, you mentioned autopsies and death, eulogies. This language, as we mentioned in an informal conversation, in the last 2 years, you're noticing this other narrative coming about, which is Detroit is alive. Detroit is being rebirthed. Unfortunately, the narrative that is explaining this, or the narrative that which this is coming out, is showing a lot. It's related to the cool cities model, which shows a lot of college educated young people coming in as though this were the revitalizing force that's going to create a new Detroit. It might be shocking to some. It's very heartbreaking to me and some of my brothers and sisters. We actually see a revitalization of pioneer language, as calling Detroit a frontier, or talking about urban homesteading, which goes to this narrative of manifest destiny. And as those who know what happened to the Native Americans go, whenever you hear this pioneering and homesteading language, it makes those of us shudder and concern, because the pioneers didn't just move to empty land. There was a genocide process, a displacement process that went along with this pioneering. So we're actually hearing that language also come about in Detroit. Part of the narrative that we're bringing about is embodying and lifting up the community, the entrenched community that's been here for many generations. It's not a completely black community. I call Detroit a global city. though it has a majority of black citizens, a majority of Africans, it's and so we're talking about gathering those resources and uplifting the work that has been done for not only survival but thriving, not only countering certain institutional things that we're not getting from various institutions, but really pulling together and creating strong networks and communities, which is going to be some skills which everyone is going to really look towards in this next coming period. And so we really are showing the life and the vibrancy that is within Detroit, even though it's not dependent on the existence of capital. It's not dependent on nice shiny buildings and brand new architecture.
As like the outside savior that's coming in, and that's the narrative. There's so much that you said that I could like draw direct parallels with Cairo. It's so amazing. There's so many lessons that this conversation can give people in other towns. Like for example, when you were talking about the city of Detroit as a metropolis and as a cosmopolitan, kind of center that interacts with other cultures and then includes other cultures with roots in Black culture. People don't acknowledge that every single center of culture exchange, if you want to call it a city, is like every single one of them is rooted in a home culture. Sometimes you might think that culture is invisible because, let's say in the US, the invisible culture is white because it's the majority, or if it's, from that I kind of wanted to bridge to acknowledging Black culture as a host or as a home to a cultural exchange that's can even be global on issues of decolonization and reclaiming one's heritage and identity. And inevitably have to talk about hip hop, at least for me, when you're talking about that, because for me, like hip hop reached me in Egypt and empowered me so much before I ever even knew English. I just knew the imagery and the, until I got to know the words, I knew that this was something that was here for my empowerment. So stemming from that, would you like to elaborate on hip hop roots in Detroit?
I'm still going. It's a process of learning. It's always a lot of work to learn, what the real history is, because the corporate history that we're often taught, doesn't tell these, full pictures. Most people probably have heard of Eminem, but I'm hanging around people who've been in the Detroit hip hop scene. A friend of mine is a DJ, and he talks about back when Eminem was just any old rapper, and some of his friends actually were some of the people that taught Eminem how to rap. There was a place called the Hip Hop Shop, which had a regular hip hop scene, and part of the movie of 8 Mile was based upon this hip hop scene that was very vibrant in Detroit. Right. So Detroit actually has a rich history. Some of my other friends talk about how numerous people in various places in the music industry come out of Detroit. Detroit has this attitude of, it comes out of a revision of this working class attitude, which has kind of changed into you can almost call it a hustling attitude. They say Detroit hustles harder, and so you got a lot of hard-working people. Because of this Black power structure, you have a lot of people in Detroit with a lot of administrative experience, in which in many other cities where they've excessively been more successful at keeping Black people in poverty, you don't have the same experience, whereas in Detroit you have a variety of people with variety of administrative experiences that they can pass on down to the community. And so we see Detroit people leave Detroit. On Facebook, I meet various people that are from Detroit, and they're doing a variety of things in their places. A lot of the folks that are hip-hop artists are moving independently, touring independently, selling records independently, making their money independently. And so there's a whole scene of folks who have just figured out smart ways to go without going into this corporate system that has influenced us. And now I'm part of a group, and we're working on 21st century hip hop. For right now, that's looking at really transforming, since we're talking about transformative language arts, transforming hip hop from this corporate thing, which is brought to our community to really something that grows out of our community. And so that's just a little smidgen. I guess now I'll give a few shouts outs. I'm part of a crew called The Collective featuring Bryce, Sirius, Blue Lady Firetide, Pharaoh DeSage. Got to throw out DJ Sakari, Sacramento Knox, Antoine Godbody, Wood Zombie, DJ Mefta, DJ Los, Shamako Noble, who's been a big mentor and teacher from out in the Bay Area. There's a lot of other folks, but I don't want to spend the whole time listing individuals.
No, I appreciate that. I'm gonna definitely go back and like rewind, pause, look up, rewind, and just go through the whole list. I love the like what you were saying about administrative experience and hustle culture as part of literally something that empowered the people to have command over their language and the economic structures around your language.
For sure. I mean, if you look at hip hop in general, you want to talk about transformative power. There's very few things in the United States that have nearly the transformative power of hip hop. First, hip hop really had its roots in alternatives to violence. It had its roots in creating means of education that people weren't getting in schools. It had its roots in getting kids out of undesirable situations and transforming the community, which was given very little. And over these next decades, these same people who were treated by society as undesirables came to become celebrities, business executives, tastemakers that would define the entire United States settler culture. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's transformation right there. If it weren't for hip hop, these people were slated to be prisoners, criminals, and undesirables of our community, of our society. So before we even get to 21st century hip hop, we're standing on the shoulders of the transformative power of hip hop in general.
Stemming from that, one of the key transformative aspects of hip hop for a lot of people has been the lyricism, kind of the carrying down a tradition of oral history, really of passing down oral culture.
One thing I come across that one of the first things that comes to my mind is in terms of the motivation. As I was earlier in my 20s thinking about not just art, but I guess career path and where I put my energy, I was having these conversations with a variety of, especially young men, my peers and other people from around, and just repeatedly hearing these stories about these different people that literally changed their life. Maybe you could say saved their life or taught them various things. People such as KRS-One, Public Enemy, Wu-Tang Clan, even people saw themselves mirrored in NWA. Literally hearing these messages repeated, how they were guided towards knowledge of self, as you mentioned, towards reflection, towards seeing a vision of themselves, self-esteem, wisdom, understanding. And it really made me realize, like, when it comes to my people, when it comes to my community, like, this culture is having a major effect.
And it's also something that kept people informed. It was everything from like current events to like sometimes I remember I used to go on like Wikipedia when I'm listening to a lyric and look up like what's happening there, and it's like kind of an offshoot but also a mainstream example. A lot of people will defend, let's say, the Comedy Central show, what's it called, The Daily Show by Jon Stewart, as news. No, that's news because I learned from it and I go back and I look up what's happening, and it's kind of shown in this artistic and this creative way. And hip hop was one of the first examples that I've ever seen that were like that. And then you can, with your life, you can do the work. You can fill in, as a community, as a person, you can fill in the gaps of what has been introduced to you through the song. But
I was reading this great book called When Rap Was Conscious, which focused on hip hop from the late 80s through the mid 90s. And it talks exactly about that. It talks about music, films, both fiction and nonfiction literature, and how each of those forms were like in a conversation with each other. And, the music might put you on to a certain movie, or the movie might have certain music in the soundtrack, or the lyrics might refer to certain books, and then people will go and look up those books. And so at that time, which many people call the golden era of hip hop, the music and the whole environment really helped to culture us, helped to make us more literate, helped to make us more aware of our circumstances. And so I think that energy is definitely a great inspiration. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he barks when people walk past the house.
They're so energetic. They're just they're a ball of energy. What's his name?
Baby.
Aw, that's so cute. I grew up around Brownie and Ashley. Those were our two animals.
Oh,
Would you like to maybe take a couple of your lyrics from at the beginning of Twice in a Lifetime, We Arrive? You have from chrysalis to butterfly. And it's funny you have that, like you say, twice in a lifetime we arrive, thanks to the ancestors, praise the creator, because we were not only meant to survive, but we transform to something greater. From chrysalis to butterfly, we stretch our wings. We'll see you later. It's kind of interesting that you have transform in one line, and then you have chrysalis. For TLA, that's the name of the journal that we just started. The name of it is chrysalis, because it's such a beautiful symbol that it's also and we're trying to do something completely new with what a journal means. It's a Creative Commons license, and we're trying to incorporate not just traditional academic journals, but also if you have a creative piece, if you like, we're trying to kind of democratize that notion of a journal.
That's Joe Riley, who sings the chorus. You should definitely check him out. He's definitely an artist who's much in line with these philosophies. He did a lot of writing on the chorus. You hear his voice, you hear his guitar on the song. He wrote, I'm pretty sure he wrote that line.
Your art is a reflection of everything that you said about what Detroit is blossoming into from its own citizens, and has been from its own citizens, such as, you reference everything from, let's say, pop culture with Aaliyah and Whitney, and you also reference the Arab Spring, so kind of a parallel movement of liberation. And then in the other song, in Will Electricity or Lessons Learned, you reference histories of Kemet. It's just a wealth of references that are very smoothly put together, and I just really appreciate I just gotta say, I really appreciate your lyrics for that. And I love that depth of music where you feel like you've came out of it and you're not the same as when you entered it. Another quick question too: who does your beats? Because whoever that is very talented as well.
We were part of a group performance acoustic group called the Long Hairs Collective with a Z. And so this track right here was kind of like a reunion track, because it had been a number of years since we really had made music together. In terms of this album, in terms of this song, Matthew Cross, Rise Like Lions Productions, I was really proud of the production work that he did to create the sound for this song, Twice in a Lifetime. And for the other one, Lessons Learned, aka Will Electricity, I worked with Bryce. I'm working on a mixtape project in which I'm using some mainstream beats, kind of beats that people may or may not be familiar with within the realm of hip hop already, kind of repurposing them, spitting over them. So that's my next project, which will come out later, probably in the spring, that I'm still creating, still writing for. And so the Lessons Learned was the first one from this mixtape project that I'm working on. About the references, I really, one of the things that I like is, I think, kind of similar to the global Black metropolis, like hip hop as this space where it can hold a variety of identities. It can give shouts out to various peoples, various movements. It can, be inclusive. And so definitely coming in Detroit experiences, but, showing other folks, other peoples like, yo, what's up? We see you, which to me, I think, helps to foster that communication.
Definitely. More on a personal tone, and this is something that just I'm passionate about. I know we've talked about a good amount too of reclaiming what it means to have, the spiritual, which there's a lot of marketing, a lot of, not to diss the term new age, but unfortunately it's been kind of associated with, individualism and isolated self-fulfillment. That's very, kind of goes counter to the narratives of reclaiming your roots and of working in community, and knowing that even a community has a body and a soul. And not just, the individual being indulgently, wishing for things to manifest. Because even the traditional spiritualities, we have the traditional religions, a lot of their histories have been buried and, you know, rediscovered and buried again. And there were many times where I've asked people who were not even, you know, wouldn't call themselves religious or spiritual, and they were at a protest, and it felt like a religious experience, you know, just being around people and being chanting something that is all felt together. In terms of your work, you can go into memory, you can go into philosophy, however you want to take that question, something you read, whatever it is. What did you feel is spiritual? What did you discover? Like, especially I'm interested, you know, maybe something that you believe in, but something you discovered along the way that felt, you know, that is spirit, that is us having spirit, that is me having spirit.
Well, I think that that's a lovely question. I come out of spirituality, my first connection through healing.
Yeah.
You know, through what does it take to heal, and a lot of the healing, you know, has to do with definitely the present moment, but also our history. Healing from our history or our interpretation of our history. You know what I'm saying? In order to shake off things or unblock things, you know, and if we're in denial or if we misinterpret our history, you know, then we may have blocks or we may have, you know, certain unexplained subconscious things that we can't, you know, that block us from this wholeness, you know. And I think that our society is like that. You know, the United States of America society was created based on racial superiority. It's now creating this globalized infrastructure based on exploitation, but yet it tells this history which is, you could say, whitewashed or which is incomplete, you know. And sometimes people say we are all human beings in order to not deal with issues of power or not deal with issues of history. Whereas if you look at the we are all human beings, you know, there's tens of millions of people all over the world that are dealing with imperialism and the theft and destruction of their community, Africa and North America, South America, Australia, Asia. This is a very human part of our experience. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To have to deal with this. And so I think that part of this spirituality is this truthfulness, you know, like if we're closed off or we can't handle the truth or we deny, you know, the aspects of truth, you know, then I think that that's just like with ourselves, you know, if we deny these aspects of our truth and of our life and of our experience, we're going to have certain blocks or certain obstacles towards our spiritual openness. So I think that that relates to both art as well as activism. I think that art, you're trying to convey these messages, you know, in ways that people can be receptive to it. And like you said, so they could just, you know, it's not a lecture. You know, I work a lot with folks that are talking about decolonization in a bunch of different ways, you know, going much beyond the language of calling ourselves African Americans, really looking at sovereignty, really looking at African heritage. Deal with some other folks who taught me about Zaga Bizing, I believe, Anishinaabe, which is a native name for Detroit, the original inhabitants of this land, you know, that I'm sitting on. Looking beyond, you know, this immediate circumstance. And even if you go to a doctor, you know, you might have to change your diet. You might have to change your lifestyle. You might have to change something in order to heal. And I think that that's part of the call of this, both art and activism. You know, it's like, yo, in order to heal, in order to have another type of wholeness, we might have to do some things differently. You know, I used to live in Ann Arbor for a time, and I was very privileged to be able to pay money and pay for meditation and pay for psychic trainings and different energy thingies and different things like that. It was all very nice and fine and some great experiences. And I'm actually happy because now I have some friends that are doing some of these same things in a Detroit context. In spirituality, there's this notion, you know, like whether you say God is everywhere or everything is God, you know, then it kind of is like, well, if everything is God, then why do I feel that there's more God here where I'm paying this money and less God here in this impoverished environment? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I had to reconcile that. And it was like, well, if everything is God, then I don't have to pay this money. I need to hold the consciousness myself, and then I can be anywhere and find God, reveal God, unveil God, wherever I go, as opposed to which, to me, is starting to get to some of the things that you're talking about, in which creating this space for God becomes associated with paying money and joining, certain spaces. And I can't speak to anybody else's experience, but I can only speak to my own experience, in which my search for the universal, to me, I definitely feel like we should create supportive spaces, but I also feel like, just from the myths and legends and stories that I heard, it's like, part of it is unveiling the God that's everywhere, even in the things that other people may think of as negative. Will electricity, I say, for us it's just a regular slice of this eternity. Every day's a miracle. Every phrase is lyrical. Fire, come and burn with me. And then it goes on, but it's like other people may put judgments on your perceptions, but there could be miracles popping off, you know what I'm saying, right, right in the hood, right in the barrio, right in these circumstances, and that phrase right there was a revision or a kind of take. Athletic Mike League, which was a very influential group for me out of Ann Arbor. The Ann Arbor hip hop community was very influential for me. I believe the song was called Unconscious, but he says, what lyrics? This is me breathing.
Yeah. When people say, we're all human beings, but how to start from that, how to use that as a bedrock, and because oftentimes it's used as sort of, instead of a bedrock to build on, to extend, what it means to connect a humanity through your experience or your individual communal. It's kind of the opposite. It becomes like a conceptual ideal, and then it becomes like, okay, how do I mask? How do I use we're all human beings as an excuse to say, well, I know already how it's like. I know what a human being is. I know how and then you don't have to, like decolonization is here and spirituality is here, because that's not, I just need to acknowledge that we're all human beings. And now I don't need to know about anything else, because that's not, and it's like the complete opposite. Like there's an imminence to what is miraculous. Looking at the human beings around you, being in your community or outside of it, and know that is a human experience you may be consciously or unconsciously contributing to or a part of or being inflicted by or whatever it may be, and taking an active role in directing that.
It reminds me, from things that I've been exposed to, that spirituality is about moving towards mastery of one's energy.
Yeah.
And money is a form of energy.
Definitely.
Along with thoughts, along with words, along with deeds. But money is also, so if you're giving your money to certain institutions, and those institutions are killing people, or those institutions are exploiting the resources, or those institutions are destroying people's homes in order to take certain energy, abusing sweatshop workers or whatever, so we talk about building a 21st century hip hop energy. It's this spiritual practice of withdrawing our money, mastering our money, mastering this energy, and using it to uplift, rather than just throwing it out there willy-nilly, or just assuming, or just saying, well, because the money touched my hand, it'll be good.
Yeah.
Annie DeFranco recently got called out. You heard about that?
No, I love her, but I haven't heard any recent news of her.
Oh yeah, she got called out because she was going to do a songwriting workshop. It was like $1,000 songwriting workshop that she was going to do at a former plantation, which is currently owned by a right-wing homophobic billionaire.
Annie DeFranco.
Mad people of color, black women, were telling her no, no, no. And many of her fans, especially the white fans, were defending her and were like, we're all human beings and you guys need to learn. And
that's a very relevant example to it. Yeah.
It was this divisive thing, and eventually she apologized, but it took, a week, or it took, this period of time in which people were going back and forth, and a lot of argument, and a lot of, you know what I'm saying, and a lot of, no, I'm maintaining my position, and no, I'm defending this position, when people were trying to talk about, well, how is your money used? And there was this notion like, well, we know that something horrid happened, but we're just going to go and shine our light, or, something like that, something kind of abstract. We're going to go and shine our light at this plantation, Meanwhile, you're paying this money and you're generating
that
all this
structure.
revenue.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that that's a concrete example, of there's a lot of different energies that we have in this 21st century for us to be aware of.
Well, I guess we're ready to move on to the final creative exercise of which is how I want to end every interview. Earlier in the interview, I was mentioning this phrase of writing eulogies for Detroit, and I got it actually from one of the websites you shared for me about the documentary "We Are Not Ghosts."
Yep.
And you wrote a review of the documentary, which was excellent. But I'm gonna go ahead and read that.
Yes, please do.
Quote, and it was by poet Jessica Care Moore. The statement goes, "So don't write eulogies for Detroit. No uninspired folk songs of gloom. Some of us are coming home to show how we make the planet move." Creative exercise, if you want to freestyle, if you want to write it down, if you want to, I won't even try to freestyle, especially when you're around, because I'm gonna fail.
We'll go for 5 minutes.
Okay, you got it. You want to go ahead?
All right. We'll see. For the TL interview, free write, Saturday. Let's reinvent first, burst barriers, then implement later. It's time for the percolator, motorized sound innovators. We rock planets like jet generators, Detroit knocking on your doors. They call us Horsemen 4 and label our city the apocalypse. Red, white, yellow, black, our metropolis stretches each point of the global compass. Struggling over names, media hanging over our head like blame. We're so alive, believers call our communion the Christ. We built this city on rock and roll. Now we are excluded from their halls of fame. Our funk still smells like chitlins, stains like motor oil. Every day we anoint mics, bless beats, and grow rhythmic universal.
Wow. I love what you do. I love the world you just built. That was amazing. Don't write eulogies for a living girl. And don't proclaim her naked and starving just because she don't wear your clothes round her neck, your food in her throat. Of course you may gift, trade, and marry tastes, but don't be declaring her insane. Don't be declaring insane the sinew of a culture beast, unlike your own. We are all human, she whispered into the musk of Cairo, surrounded by Molotov, graffiti, and history as fresh as her memories, red and loud and teeming. Come migration time, she's told she's saved by sanitizing neon lights, loudspeakers, bills paid, bills never signed, rights never granted, but at least gratuities included. So do not declare dead a beast different from your own. We are all human, said an other, who was otherwise taught to think of you as a tomb. So, thank you so much, William. It finally happened. Thank you. And this was an amazing conversation. I learned so much from it. And I'm definitely, like I said, I'm going to go back and play, pause, look up, play, pause, look up. And I hope that our listeners and viewers will do the same. I'll also drop some links at the end of the interview in the text for people to find your work, to find your music, and to go ahead and, how to support it, how to buy your tracks. And I love I got a copy of your album and I got the electronic copy. And please watch out for this man. What I love about what you do is I get that sense of, you maintaining your integrity and maintaining your passion and your connection to a larger community. And, you never just said, it was me or I didn't. You definitely take credit and should take credit for what you do, but you shine light on a legacy and just a long history and contemporary movements that also help make you who you are. And I really appreciate that. Such an inspiring example for artists like myself and other artists out there to know that, you can still be successful artists and do that.
Thank you so much. They say we're ancestors in training, so I appreciate you giving me a chance to shine and a chance to share.
There you go. You heard it from him. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Will.
Peace.